My name is Natalie Carter, and 8 years ago, I built something that should have made me untouchable. Not invincible. I'm not that naive, but valuable enough that removing me from the equation would cost more than keeping me happy. That's what I thought. Anyway, sitting in my corner office at Axion Core Solutions, watching the Seattle rain streak down floor-to-ceiling windows while our latest deployment processed 17 million medical claims in under 3 minutes. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Subject line: Strategic Planning Session. Mandatory attendance. From Isabella Price, our new CEO, hired 6 months ago to scale operations and maximize shareholder value. I'd seen her type before: Wharton MBA, McKinsey pedigree, the kind of executive who spoke in bullet points and viewed engineering as a necessary evil rather than the beating heart of a tech company. I minimized the terminal window where I'd been reviewing our latest optimization metrics and opened the email. Monday, 9 a.m., boardroom. The distribution list included the entire C-suite except, curiously, our CFO Marcus Huang, who'd been my ally since the early days. Something cold settled in my stomach. In 8 years of building this company from a garage startup to a $300 million enterprise, I'd learned to trust that feeling. The boardroom smelled like leather and disappointment when I walked in Monday morning. Isabella sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members I barely recognized, recent additions from our Series C funding round. To her right sat Leon Grant, a name I knew from tech blogs, but had never met in person. Young, maybe 28, with the kind of carefully disheveled hair that suggested he spent more time on his appearance than his code. Natalie. Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Please, have a seat. I chose the chair directly across from her, maintaining eye contact. Whatever this was, I wouldn't make it easy. I'll get straight to the point, she said, sliding a folder across the table. The board has decided to take Axion Core in a new direction. Your contributions to building our foundation have been adequate, but we need leadership that understands growth, not just maintenance. Adequate. 8 years of 16-hour days, of solving problems that would have killed lesser companies, of building a data processing engine that our competitors couldn't match, reduced to adequate. I opened the folder. Separation agreement, effective immediately. 2 weeks severance, an insult considering I still own 12% of the company. And there, buried on page 3, the real knife termination date of March 31st. My retention bonus of $3.2 million was set to vest on April 1st. You're firing me one day before my bonus vests. It wasn't a question. The timing is unfortunate, Isabella said, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. But Leon here has some exciting ideas about leveraging blockchain and AI to revolutionize our platform. We need someone who speaks the language of tomorrow, not yesterday. Leon leaned forward, eager as a puppy. I've analyzed your architecture. Natalie, solid work. But there's so much potential for disruption. I'm thinking complete microservices overhaul. Maybe some smart contracts for claim processing. Smart contracts for HIPAA-compliant medical data. I kept my voice level. Have you considered the regulatory implications? The audit requirements alone would... That's exactly the kind of legacy thinking we need to move past, Isabella interrupted. Leon has a vision. We need to be bold. I closed the folder and stood. They expected anger, maybe tears. Instead, I smiled. I'll need 24 hours to review this with my attorney. Of course, Isabella said, already dismissing me. But the terms are non-negotiable. Oh, and there's a comprehensive non-compete clause. 18 months. We wouldn't want our proprietary knowledge walking out the door. Proprietary knowledge, as if they had any idea what they were really losing. I spent that night in my home office, not reviewing the separation agreement, but poring over a different document, one most people had forgotten existed. The technology retention and licensing agreement I'd insisted on when we incorporated, back when my co-founders thought I was being paranoid. Young founders often make the mistake of believing equity equals control. I'd learned early that ownership means nothing if someone else holds the keys to the kingdom. So I'd kept them the core algorithms, the foundational patents, the architecture that everything else was built on. Axion Core had a license to use them. Yes, but that license was tied to my continued involvement as either an employee or board member. The clause was buried in subsection 47B of our operating agreement, written in the kind of dense legalese that made even lawyers' eyes glaze over. I'd paid my attorney Jonathan Miles, a former gray hat hacker turned tech lawyer, an extra $10,000 to make it both ironclad and incomprehensible. I called him at midnight. "John, they're forcing me out, one day before vesting." "The bastards," he said, instantly awake. John lived on hacker time. Midnight was practically afternoon for him. "Please tell me you're recording everything." "Every meeting, every email. But that's not why I'm calling. I need you to review the retention clause. I think it's time." I heard him typing, probably pulling up the documents. "Holy shit, Nat, you still own the core IP?" "Not own, control. There's a difference. A difference that's about to cost them everything." He paused. "You know what this means, right? The second you're terminated, their license expires, they'll be running stolen software. Not stolen, unlicensed. And I'm sure once they realize their mistake, we can negotiate a new arrangement, at market rates. Market rates for technology that processes 60% of insurance claims on the West Coast." John laughed. "That's what, 8 figures annually. Unless someone else wants an exclusive license, then it's worth whatever they're willing to pay." The next morning, I signed the separation agreement without argument. Isabella looked disappointed. She'd clearly hoped for more drama. Leon spent the meeting sketching system diagrams on his tablet, occasionally glancing up to offer condescending smiles. "We'll need you to transition your responsibilities over the next 2 weeks," Isabella said. "Leon will shadow you. Learn the critical systems." "Of course," I agreed. "I'll make sure he understands everything he needs to know." What I didn't mention was that understanding and implementing were very different things. Our system wasn't just code. It was 8 years of evolutionary problem solving. Patches on top of optimizations, on top of architectural decisions that made sense only if you'd been there when the problems arose. It was like trying to understand a city by looking at a map, without knowing why the streets curved around obstacles that no longer existed. Leon, to his credit, tried. He showed up to our first transition meeting with a fresh notebook and enough energy drinks to power a small startup. But watching him try to grasp our architecture was like watching someone try to understand jazz by reading sheet music. "I don't understand why you're using this custom encryption protocol," he said, staring at the code. "Wouldn't standard TLS be simpler?" "TLS would be simpler," I agreed. "Until you need to process 12 million claims in real time while maintaining HIPAA compliance across 17 different state jurisdictions, each with their own data residency requirements." He nodded like he understood, but I saw the confusion in his eyes. "Maybe we could containerize." "We tried that in year 3. The latency killed us. This hybrid approach is ugly, but it works." "Ugly code is technical debt," he recited, probably from some Medium article. "We should refactor." I bit back my real response. That's certainly one approach. By the end of the first week, the cracks were showing. Leon had ideas, lots of them, but no understanding of why we'd made the choices we had. He wanted to revolutionize everything without first understanding what he was revolutionizing. Meanwhile, I was quietly documenting everything, every meeting, every question, every moment where critical information was overlooked or dismissed. Not out of spite, okay? Maybe a little spite, but because I knew what was coming. The call came on Tuesday of my second week. Marcus Huang, our CFO, the one who'd been excluded from my termination meeting. "Nat, we need to talk, off the record." We met at a dive bar in Fremont, the kind of place where tech executives went to pretend they were still human. Marcus looked like he'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. "Westbridge is ready to sign," he said without preamble. $61 million for a 5-year exclusive on our platform. Biggest deal in company history. Westbridge Insurance. I knew them well. We'd been courting them for 2 years. They processed 1/3 of all medical claims in California. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it. That deal would transform AxiomCore from a promising startup to a legitimate player. "Isabella's taking all the credit. Says her new vision is what closed it." He downed his whiskey. "But Nat, they're signing because of your work, the efficiency metrics, the uptime guarantees. That's all you—" "Not anymore." "That's just it." He leaned in. "The contract specifically references our proprietary data processing engine. They want guarantees about the IP." I kept my face neutral. I'm sure legal has it covered. That's what Isabella said, but I've been CFO long enough to know when lawyers are nervous. They keep asking about technology licenses, third-party IP. Isabella keeps saying it's all company property. Interesting. Marcus studied me. You're too calm. What aren't you telling me? Read subsection 47B of the operating agreement, I said. The one from incorporation. Then check who actually holds the patents on our core algorithms. His face went pale. Nat, no. They fired me one day before my bonus vested. Marcus, did they really think I'd spent 8 years building this without protecting myself? The demo is Friday. If Westbridge finds out, then I suggest someone reads the fine print before then. Thursday afternoon, 36 hours before the Westbridge demo, I got a call from our general counsel, then another from the head of the board, then, finally, Isabella herself. We need to discuss your transition, she said, voice tight. I thought we were discussing it. Leon's been taking notes. Don't play games, Natalie. We've discovered some irregularities in our IP documentation. Irregularities. Such a pleasant euphemism for, we just realized we don't own what we're selling. I'm happy to meet, I said. But I should mention I have a consultation scheduled tomorrow with MedVantage. You know how it is, bills to pay. MedVantage, Westbridge's primary competitor and a company that had been trying to poach our technology for 3 years. Isabella's sharp intake of breath was worth the price of admission. The emergency board meeting convened that evening, the same boardroom, but the power dynamics had shifted. Isabella no longer sat at the head of the table. That spot was occupied by David Kim. The lead board member who'd apparently just learned his $300 million company was built on borrowed technology. Explain, he said, sliding a copy of the retention agreement across the table. It's quite simple, I said. When we incorporated, I retained ownership of the core technology I developed. Axion Core has an unlimited license to use it as long as I remain an employee or board member. That license terminated. I checked my watch 6 days ago. This is extortion, Isabella spat. This is contract law, John corrected. He'd insisted on attending, partly for legal support, but mostly because he enjoyed the show. My client built the foundation of this company. She protected her interests. You chose to terminate her without understanding the full ramifications. What do you want? David asked. Well, that depends. Westbridge wants to license technology for $61 million. I own that technology. We could structure a sub-license agreement, but that would require… How much? 70% of the contract value, annually. Isabella stood so fast her chair toppled. That's insane. That's below market rate for exclusive use. Of course, if you'd prefer, I can offer Westbridge a direct license. Cut out the middleman. You signed a non-compete, Leon said, speaking for the first time. Which prevents me from working for a competitor. I agreed. It says nothing about licensing my own technology. Your lawyers should have caught that. They'd tried to be clever with the termination date, squeezing out 1 more day before my bonus. They'd forgotten that cleverness without wisdom is just another way to hang yourself. David Kim was a good businessman. He knew when he was beaten. What are our options? 3, I said, holding up fingers. 1, you negotiate a license with me, expensive, but you keep Westbridge. 2, I license directly to MedVantage, who I'm sure would love to offer Westbridge a better deal. You lose your biggest contract and probably the company. 3, you try to rebuild the platform from scratch without infringing on my IP. Leon seems confident maybe he can deliver a working system in, 2 years? 6 months, Leon interjected. I've been reviewing the architecture, with modern frameworks. The Westbridge demo is tomorrow, David cut him off. Not 6 months from now. There's a 4th option, Isabella said. We sue you for sabotage, corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets. John actually laughed. Please do. Discovery would be fascinating, especially the part where we depose every engineer about who actually wrote the code, or where we examine why you terminated my client one day before a major bonus vested. I'm sure Westbridge would love to hear about the stability of their potential partner's leadership. The room fell silent. Outside, Seattle did what Seattle does, rain fell. Clouds gathered. The world kept spinning while careers ended in climate-controlled boardrooms. I need the room, David finally said. Everyone except Natalie and her counsel. Isabella started to protest, but David's look could have frozen hell. She left, Leon trailing behind like a lost puppy. You planned this, David said when we were alone. I planned for this, I corrected. There's a difference. I hope to build something great here. David, I gave 8 years of my life to this company, but I also knew that hope without preparation is just naivety. What do you really want? Originally to build revolutionary technology and be fairly compensated for it, but that ship sailed when you let Isabella play games with my vesting date. That wasn't the board's decision. Everything is the board's decision. That's what oversight means. I leaned back. But we're past that now. What I want is what's fair. I built the engine that drives this company. You tried to steal it. Now you'll pay market rate. And if we refuse? Then in 6 hours, I'll be signing an exclusive license with MedVantage. They've already sent the term sheet. Would you like to see it? John slid another folder across the table. $61 million for exclusive rights to technology I'd built in my garage, refined in Axion Core's offices, and protected with paranoid foresight. David read it, his poker face finally cracking. They'll destroy us. Yes, I agreed. They will? What happened to loyalty? Natalie. To building something together. Loyalty. I stood, 8 years of frustration finally breaking through. I was loyal when I worked 100-hour weeks for equity instead of salary. I was loyal when I turned down Google's offer because I believed in what we were building. I was loyal right up until you let a CEO who's been here 6 months fire me to save $3 million. You want to talk about loyalty? Where was yours? The demo was scheduled for 2 p.m. Friday. At 9 a.m., I sat in MedVantage's offices, their legal team ready to execute our agreement the moment the clock struck noon, my deadline for Axion Core to respond. At 11:47, my phone rang. David Kim. The board has voted to remove Isabella as CEO. Effective immediately, we're prepared to offer you the CTO position with a guaranteed board seat, full vesting of your previous bonus, and an additional retention package. Not interested. Natalie. I gave you 8 years. David, you gave me 2 weeks. Now you want me back because you need me. That's not leadership, that's desperation. Then what? You'll destroy the company you built. I'll license my technology to the highest bidder. What happens to Axion Core is no longer my concern. We'll match MedVantage's offer, full license fee, paid annually. I looked across the table at James Chen, MedVantage's CEO, who'd been waiting 3 years for this moment. He nodded. MedVantage is offering more than money, I said. They're offering respect, partnership, a chance to build something without looking over my shoulder for the next Isabella. Please, David's voice cracked. 300 jobs, Natalie, people you hired, teams you built. People who watched me get marched out for a quick buck. Teams that said nothing when 8 years of work was called adequate. That's not fair. Fair, I laughed. Was it fair to fire me one day before vesting? Was it fair to hand my life's work to someone who thinks blockchain solves everything? You want to talk about fair? Silence. Then what would it take? Nothing you're willing to give. Try me. I thought about it, really thought about it. The company I'd built, the people I'd hired, the vision we'd shared before MBAs and board members turned it into just another startup grinding toward an exit. 70% of the Westbridge contract, 50% of any future licenses, board seat with veto power over technology decisions, and Leon's resignation. I won't work with someone who thinks 8 years of evolution can be replaced by 6 months of disruption. That's significant. That's the price of betrayal. David, take it or leave it. I need to consult. You have 8 minutes. I hung up and turned to James. He'll counter with 50 and 30. And you'll say, nothing, because in 8 minutes, you'll own the exclusive rights to technology that processes 60% of West Coast medical claims. You're a hard woman, Natalie Carter. No, I said. I'm a prepared woman. There's a difference. At 11:58, my phone buzzed. Text from David. Board agrees to your terms. Contract within the hour. I stared at it for 30 seconds. 30 seconds where Axion Core's future hung in the balance. 30 seconds where 300 jobs waited on my decision. 30 seconds where I could choose between revenge and What redemption reconciliation? At 11:59, I turned to James. I'm sorry, but I need to withdraw from our agreement. His face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. They met your terms. They exceeded them, actually. And that's enough. After what they did. No, I said. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But destroying something I spent 8 years building just to prove a point, that's not revenge, that's stupidity. You could have had both, the money and the satisfaction. Maybe, but I would have had to look at myself in the mirror knowing I burned it all down over wounded pride. James stood, extended his hand. If it doesn't work out, you'll be my first call. I left MedVantage's offices with mixed feelings. Part of me wanted the satisfaction of watching Axion Corps scramble, of seeing Isabella and Leon face the consequences of their arrogance. But the larger part, the part that had spent countless nights debugging code and solving impossible problems, knew that creation would always be more satisfying than destruction. The contract from Axion Corps arrived at 12:47. John reviewed it. Confirming they'd met every demand, I signed it at 1:15, officially licensing my technology back to the company I'd co-founded. At 200, while the Westbridge demo proceeded successfully, I stood in my empty office, packing the few personal items I'd left behind: a photo from our Series A celebration, a coffee mug with a faded Axion Corps logo, 8 years compressed into a banker's box. Isabella was gone. David had been true to his word. Leon lasted another week before resigning. His blockchain revolution dying a quiet death against the reality of HIPAA compliance. The board offered me the CEO position, but I turned it down. CTO was where I belonged, building things rather than managing politics. But I didn't return to the corner office. Instead, I took a smaller space near the engineering floor, close to the people who actually built things. The retention bonus hit my account on April 1st. The board had backdated my termination reversal. The license fees from the Westbridge deal would make me wealthy beyond my younger self's dreams. Yet sitting in my new office, reviewing the architecture Leon had tried to understand, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. 8 years of building, 2 weeks of betrayal, 1 day of reckoning, and now what? Marcus knocked on my door. The team wants to celebrate your return. I never left, I said. I just renegotiated my terms. Is that what we're calling it? He smiled. You know, for a minute there, I thought you were really going to do it. Burn us all down. For a minute there, so did I. What stopped you? I looked at the code on my screen, elegant solutions to complex problems, each line representing hours of thought and testing and refinement. Ego, probably. I couldn't stand the thought of someone else's name on my work, even if they were paying for the privilege. Isabella's gone, by the way. Took a position at some crypto startup. She'll do well there. Blockchain really is the future, just not our future. And Leon. Building the next Uber for something. Uber for haircuts, maybe. Or Uber for Uber. Who knows? Marcus laughed. You're more forgiving than I would be. No, I said. I'm more practical. Forgiveness implies I've moved past it. I haven't. I just recognize that my code matters more than my anger. He left me alone with my thoughts and my terminal. The Westbridge integration needed optimization. Leon's brief tenure had introduced inefficiencies that made my teeth itch. I pulled up the development environment and got to work. The code flowed like it always had. Logic replacing emotion. Solutions emerging from chaos. This was what I was good at. Not politics or revenge or corporate maneuvering, but building things that worked. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification: Leon had updated his profile. Revolutionizing distributed systems through blockchain innovation. I smiled and blocked him. Some bridges weren't worth maintaining, even professional ones. By evening, I'd fixed the worst of the problems. The system hummed along, processing claims with an efficiency that would make Westbridge very happy. My code, my architecture, my solution now properly licensed and paid for. I thought about the morning I'd received that first termination email. How certain Isabella had been that I was replaceable. How confident Leon had been that he could improve on 8 years of work with 6 months of buzzwords. How sure the board had been that a 2-week severance would buy my silence and compliance. They'd all learned the same lesson: competence isn't just about writing code or building systems. It's about understanding the value of what you build and protecting it accordingly. It's about knowing that while people are replaceable, the knowledge and experience they carry isn't. The retention clause had saved me, but not in the way I'd originally intended. I'd thought it would be my golden parachute, a way to profit from my paranoia. Instead, it became my leverage to return on my own terms, to prove that expertise has value beyond what shows up on a balance sheet. I saved my work and pushed it to the repository. Tomorrow there would be new problems to solve, new optimizations to find, new systems to build. But tonight, I was content knowing that my code was running, my company was succeeding, and my value was finally recognized. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle washed clean and gleaming. From my window, I could see the Space Needle lit up against the darkness, a monument to engineering and ambition. Below, the city hummed with startups and dreams and people building things they hoped would matter. I shut down my computer and gathered my things. The office was quiet. Most engineers preferred coding at night, away from meetings and interruptions, but I was done with late nights and weekend deployments. The new terms included work-life balance, and I intended to use it. In the parking garage, I passed Isabella's former spot now empty, the CEO placard already removed. Leon's visitor pass was probably gathering dust in some drawer. The company moved on, adapted, survived, just like code removed the bugs, optimized the functions, keep running. I drove home through empty streets, thinking about the $61 million contract that had almost slipped away. Tomorrow, the license fees would start flowing, the board would learn to read contracts more carefully, and somewhere, a new startup CEO would fire a critical employee without checking the fine print. But that was their lesson to learn. Mine was simpler: always retain the rights to what you build. Not out of greed or paranoia, but because sometimes the only way to prove your value is to show what happens when it's gone. The house was dark when I arrived. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the deck, looking out at the water. 8 years ago, I'd started coding in a garage with a vision of revolutionizing medical data processing. Tonight, that vision was worth $61 million to an insurance giant. Not because of blockchain or AI or whatever buzzword Leon had been selling, but because I'd solved real problems with elegant code, then been smart enough to keep the keys. Isabella had called it legacy thinking, the board had called it adequate, but Westbridge called it essential, and they were the ones writing the checks. I raised my glass to the empty night. To retention clauses, I said, and the lawyers smart enough to write them. Somewhere in the city, my code was running. Claims were being processed. Lives were being improved by faster insurance approvals, and I was being properly compensated for it. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything.